All right, here we go. We are live. It is Tuesday. I am Matt. This is Why Libertarian. For anyone who is new to the channel, please, as a usual reminder, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet. If you are watching on the blockchain, please throw me an upvote. Help me out. And if you are watching this on a platform that is not YouTube, please, head on over to YouTube and hit the subscribe if you have a YouTube account. It does help with the algorithm. It helps with the search results. But like I said, I'm on Odyssey, Vim, and a whole bunch of other platforms. So wherever you choose to listen or watch, please do so accordingly. We are continuing on an absolutely fantastic week. Last night we talked a little bit of anarchy versus slavery. Tonight we are talking about agorism. We are talking about essentially, the art of being able to kind of remove yourself from the centralized system and society that we live in, and we will continue talking about these things as well as decentralization and all the other good stuff as we continue on this week, Wednesday and Thursday as well. So without further ado, I am inviting on a special guest this week. This is Jeremiah Harding. Jeremiah, how's it going, sir?
Reasonable. Just got done with my second day of arms this week, so got a little bit of tension in my forearms here.
Yeah, you're not going to be doing, you're not shampooing your hair this evening, I hope.
I will be, actually. I got a bunch of bullshit to deal with tomorrow, so.
Yeah, you're going to have to do the old, kind of like nod in order to get to it.
I'll be fine. Part of the thing I do is, while I'm doing arms, I'll do, flexibility by pressing my bones against, a flat surface. Yep. So, I should be okay. It's just, that's the reason you might see me doing this during the show a bit.
No, it's all right. You're that's in line with the Joker poster in the back too, so it works for effect. So, to anyone who's unfamiliar with you, who are you?
I'm a cynical, pessimistic asshole, a conspiracy theorist who made a lot of enemies over the years, and I got banned from multiple social networks because either I posted too many conspiracy theories or I posted too hard against pedophiles. So basically, I have a significant amount of people who don't like me, and I use their hatred as fuel to discuss anarchy and libertarianism in general.
That's awesome. Look, if you're not pissing people off, you're not trying hard enough. That's my motto.
Right?
The impetus for this evening's episode is kind of on the heels of a prior episode and me doing some more research and stuff like that. You had written a blog article. I think this is back from, when did you write this? Was this May of 2020? It was called you need to be a gray man. Here's how. And it's essentially about almost like being a agorist, but doing it in plain sight, and essentially kind of like blending in, or at the very least not sticking out, right? So before we delve into kind of like the tips and tricks and stuff like that you include in the article, why agorism? Why did that really kind of resonate with you?
So I have the idea that anarchists of all stripes should unite. And in general, my mentality is that any sort of school that goes against the state is one that I like. I'm willing to work with all of them, but agorism specifically is praxis. Also, this outlet pays me to write for them, so that helps too.
Yes.
So, like, essentially, this is agorist praxis because if you are dealing with the state and you're trying to operate within gray and black markets, it's very helpful to know how to hide effectively and to be able to still move through the environment, because the gray market is like the sum of all actions which are not aggressive, which are not unethical, but which are also illegal. Sort of like, the state has arbitrarily decided that weed is illegal in a variety of ways, and it's
Right.
not federally decriminalized. So basically, if you go and buy some weed, that's counter economics. It's also counter economics to grow your grass a little too tall for the hoa, or to to have unlicensed solar panels hooked up to batteries that aren't on the grid. That sort of thing. Like anything that lets you give less money to the state, less support to the state, is agorist praxis. And being a gray man helps with that. Although, like, this is sort of the last ditch effort. This is if the government is like actively after you and you're trying to run away. You're not going to try to be gray all the time unless you want to for some reason. A lot of people don't mind that kind of like solitude and sort of like the life disconnected from, society. So ultimately, like, that's fine for some people, but like, I am not quite gray yet. Obviously, I have a big fucking beard, a lot of hair. That's a lot of DNA evidence is going to get left everywhere if I decide to go on like some sort of like totally legal activities. So ultimately, like, I'm not gray yet, but I do know how to go gray in case I need to. In fact, like, I've been doing a lot of stuff lately to improve my ability to go gray. Like, I hate sports, but I've been learning a significant amount about them in order to better converse about them. Like little things like that. Like, you won't be that Yahoo who doesn't understand the local sports in the area. You'll blend right in, even if you're in a sports bar, that kind of thing. Like, understanding things well enough to, like, blend in to your environment, knowing enough of the language that you can not seem like a gringo, like, little things like that. Like, the whole notion is that you're nobody. You're a face in the crowd that nobody will remember, that's mostly hidden from cameras, and that's obscured if the camera does see it. You won't come up in databases. And there's some stuff that I didn't even hit on. Like, there's the article goes over a significant amount, but like, if you have a specific gait, like the way you walk, there are gait sensors, and they can determine how who you are just by how you're walking. So like, there's a lot of stuff involved here. Like, basically, the more you blend in, the more you become just like everybody else, the more likely you are to evade whoever you're trying to evade and live to, fight another day, proverbially speaking.
Yeah. And so I mean, you said that this is kind of like a situation where you or like maybe a worst case scenario or something where you want to essentially kind of like go out of the the public view, so to speak, or be kind of identifiable as an individual. Would you say that most people on a daily basis participate in some level of kind of the gray market?
Oh, the gray market, certainly. But like, just to be clear, the gray man is, as a concept, has existed for a long time. And the like concept of the gray market was coined by Konkin. So, like, Samuel Edward Konkin wrote the Agorist Primer and the New Libertarian Manifesto. He was the founder of agorism. He also was really into sci-fi, and he used that as an avenue to discuss libertarianism. I think he was friends with Heinlein. So he created this term, gray market, to distinguish it from the white market, which is all legal action, the black market, which is all illegal action, and the gray market is sort of in between those things where you're trying to sort of bleed the state. And then the red market and pink markets are things that are unethical, murder, assassination, rape, that sort of thing. So agorists are forbidden from the red market, but we're allowed the gray and the black markets, and we try to limit our involvement in the white market. So basically, like, the gray man concept is an older concept, and it, I think, has its roots in U.S. intelligence. And it's where you're trying to become gray. You are nobody. You blend in. You are part of the pavement, and nobody can recognize you. If you're in a Hawaiian bar, you're dressed in Hawaiian colors. If you're in a preppy school, you're dressed in that stupid suit and that thin ass tie they make you wear. Like, the whole idea is that you're nobody. Nobody is going to remember you and remember, hey, that's the guy with the X, insert thing that's there. So gray man and the gray market aren't the same thing. But like, they have similar reasons for being, which is evading the state or evading some group that wants to aggress against you. And to be clear, gray man techniques can be used by unethical people. It's not like the gray market where it's like definitely not red, but like, I'd like to think that the people who read Agorist Nexus are respecting the rules of not using the red and pink markets. So, I mean, if it ends up helping some people it shouldn't help, then that's to be expected. It's sort of like, gun control. Yeah, you could also bar the bad people, but you're barring a bunch of good people as well if you don't release it. So I posted the article, and I sort of hope it helps everybody who needs it.
Yeah. No, I'm going to share the link in the comments so that folks can read it if they want. And so let's get into some of the particulars. So you had actually mentioned, or actually technically two in one kind of like swoop there. You had mentioned, long hair, facial hair, and stuff like that gives the opportunity for leaving markers behind, right? Like, DNA markers. There's also the flip side of that, right? So the flip side of that is facial recognition, or, the ability to essentially change your look. And so having facial hair or long hair also gives you that versatility of being able to do those two things. So I would imagine it's situation dependent as far as kind of like balancing those two priorities.
Well, I would say so. I would also say, and this is part of the reason that I have it, other than the white market helps many bad actors as well. Totally agreed. And like, it primarily helps bad actors because it helps the state monopoly on violence, and they're the all-time grand champions of mass murder. So the general idea is, like, I have the long hair and beard because, basically fuck people who don't like it. That's the primary reason. The secondary reason is I don't really like my facial features unobscured. I've got this big dumb chin and these big dumb ears. So I kind of like to have it there as sort of like framing. And I was getting really into hair metal at the time I started to grow it out. So like Motley Crue, Poison, Skid Row, that sort of shit. So I mean,
my wife and you would be good friends, let me tell you.
Right? Well, so that's the initial motive for growing it. But the reason I keep it, even though I might need to go gray, is because if I need to go gray, people recognize me as that long hair. People recognize me as that long hair with the beard, and that's what they would see me as from a distance. If I suddenly shaved everything off, I would look like an entirely different fucking person. Also, kind of creepy. I don't look good without it. So, but then here's the double side of that. If I did shave it all off because I needed to go gray, I could wear wigs. I could attach a prosthetic beard. I could even keep the hair itself so that it was my natural hair color and so that it would match my eyebrows.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff you can do if you choose to grow it out that you can't do if you don't choose to grow it out. So it's like it's one of those things that like yeah, it might become a liability at some point, but A, I'm not gray right now, and B, if I ever become gray, there's some utility there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's I think that versatility is it's just important in general, right? Like the ability to also kind of comprehend that. Not to mention the fact that I think something that's underlying a lot of what you talk about in the article is also it has some applicability elsewhere. It almost makes you think, or not think, but like kind of escape complacency in a way, right? Like you're actually thinking about your day-to-day activities, and what a ton of us in average America are essentially zombies or robots that consistently do the same things day in and day out. I think some other element that I took from this was also you need some level of presence of mind of understanding what your tendencies are and how to break those up. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, well, it certainly involves a lot of shedding of the sorts of routines that you had before. I would say though that it does create a new routine. Like if you don't get some element of routine, it's going to psychologically damage and potentially break you. Like
Sure.
you should still have some element of routine. You should still do things that you enjoy even though you're gray. You should just do them in private and wash your hands afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's good practice. That's good practice for sure. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about kind of like physical countenance. All right, so we talked about facial hair and things like that. What about clothing? Like, is there a baseline or a kind of best practice in terms of like types of clothing that you could use in order to essentially blend in?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, where you are, what season it is. Like, there's a lot of factors. Um, it's easiest to be gray in the winter, and the reason it's easiest to be gray in the winter is because you can layer up without getting too warm. And if you need to strip off a layer so that you look different immediately, you can do that. Um, and so like in the winter it's like because you're still a squishy human, you can still
Yep.
get like a heat stroke and over sweating and shit like that. Like it's still not good to try this too hard in the summer.
Yep.
So it's easier to do it in the winter, and basically any clothing is okay, but you should try Les Stroud, Survivor Man. I don't know how many people watch him, but his advice with his survival kits he sells is throw away the bag that it comes in. Because the bag that it comes in was basically something the company demanded, but he was like, throw it away. You should try to have like enough spaces like in your actual clothing that you're carrying it on your person, that the weight is all distributed, so that you can go into the wilderness. And if you do happen to like lose your footing, or if you're like trying to climb a wall and your hand breaks a rock off, you're not going to like jerk around and drop a bag with everything you
Yep.
need in it. It's on your person. I take the same thing with Gray Man. You should hide things on your person. You should have small like kits at various points on your body. You should have like handcuff keys sewn into your wrist thing, or like little shims in the outside of your wrist, like so that you can like reach into a handcuff thing. You should have like little first aid items. You should have compasses, blades, anything you think you would need in order to survive the environment you're in. You should probably have, and especially if you're running from the state, have things that let you run from the state more easily and efficiently and not dead.
Yep. Yeah. No, that versatility I think is important. Just in general, like in any survival situation. But to your point, yeah. And I think you even said that in the article. You also have to be comfortable with basically ditching your gear, right? Like that's also something that like the we're not the federal government, right? So like the $200,000 piece of electronics or something like that, obviously an individual is not going to be purchasing that with the expectation of tossing it in a trash can if they have to. But you essentially have to be comfortable with essentially getting rid of most, if not all, that you have on you, right?
Well, yeah, because the thing is, you need to be able to like change your look immediately. And part of being gray is if you do get spotted by like somebody who knows who to look for, who knows your facial features, if you do get spotted by facial recognition and you start to see a bunch of people talking into mouthpieces, like trying to get backup on your location, you need to be able to round a corner with a trash can near it, disrobe, and you're a different color now. They can't follow you. Like, so I add, and like, there's also the element of being a different color simply by getting those douchey, like, invertible clothing pieces. Like, you know those cunts in high school who like always used to wear the invertible clothing like it made them cool, but they never did anything with it. Well, this is what you can do with it. Like, suddenly, like, you turn from a red person to a black person in terms of like visibility from a distance. Sure. And as long as they're not like actively watching you on their CCTV, you can blend in very easily, especially if there's a crowd you can walk with. Like, if you can get in the middle of a crowd, that's really good, especially since facial recognition has a harder time detecting faces that are closer to each other.
And you made a point of that in the article, and you also talked about certain circumstances associated with COVID and the pandemic, right? I think a lot of people, in fact, there was I forget who wrote it, but it was shared out by the Libertarian Party, was, essentially a story that was written about, masks during the pandemic make facial recognition more difficult. I don't think you thought it was that panacea, though, right? Like, they had already started to try and fix that, right?
In China, they have already perfected mask avoidant facial recognition because it uses your T-zone. It uses basically here up, and if it can see your eyebrows, your eyes, your nose, and compare that to some other like data, like your gait, your outfit, your cell phone bouncing sounds and shit off of shit. Like, there's a ton of stuff that they can use to isolate the fact that not only is it you, but you're in this location. So like, the idea that masks are somehow not just an occult like initiation process is absurd. Like, masks are literally, they don't protect you from viruses. They don't protect other people from viruses for the most part, because most of us aren't carrying a significant enough viral load that it's a problem. And second off, like, they're not protecting you from facial recognition because, if anything, they're helping it be trained on your eyes alone. So, I mean, like, especially if you're going out in public and using cards attached to your name, attached to your cell phone specifically as an NFC payment device. Like, there's a ton of things people have already done to fuck themselves over in this regard. And the idea that having a mask on is going to help that, obsequious.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think you even made the point, like, just an oversized hoodie is underestimated, or I forget what you said, but it's essentially just as effective, if not better, than a mask in terms of that obscuring like your outline, right?
Yeah, well, because first off, you can pull the hoodie down and it can cover your eyebrows, which gives the facial recognition less to pinpoint. Because if it doesn't have that frame of reference, it doesn't have the angles and the markers. So you can shave your eyebrows. You can wear a bill cap that covers your eyes and just sort of look down like this. There's a game called Watch Dogs, and the guy uses a mask in the form of a neck gaiter, which he just sort of pulls up when he wants to go anon. But he also has a bill cap. So you walk like this with your bill cap down, and your bill cap is covering your eyes and obscuring them from the facial recognition camera, and you've got your neck gaiter up covering your nose. Then your face is a block. They don't know you. Yeah. But like, just a mask? Please.
Well, you had to figure that. I mean, like, look, the security state is not dumb, right? Like they might be. Well, no, input whatever word you want. Mostly, they are not altruistic. I'll tell you that much. But they're also not dumb, right? So, like, the moment this became a thing or a possibility, regardless of whether you think it was, in the present or if it was already, in the works for a couple of years, I'm sure that they were already thinking of that contingency if they didn't already have it included. But so you mentioned electronics. So let's talk about electronics. So the phones being probably the most. I mean, we saw countries. Where was it? Malaysia maybe or Taiwan, where they essentially just use smartphones to track everyone and contact trace them during COVID.
Yeah.
Which makes you ask, like, okay, weren't they just probably doing that beforehand anyway?
Yes.
But so that's pretty much the easiest way that most of us, generic human beings with smartphones in our pockets are being tracked now. So what is the solution? What's the alternative to, your iPhone or whatever, Android or whatever you're using?
So the first thing is have a cell phone that's not online. And like you can do that with some privacy focused cell phones. But the thing is that, like, if you have a cell phone attached to your name and identity, and that cell phone passes by an audio source transmitting a frequency, they will be able to find you.
Wow.
If that cell phone attached to your name is near enough to radio towers that they can isolate radio signals off of it, then they can track you. If your cell phone interacts with local Wi-Fi networks by even asking them what they are, the device ID will be recognized and they can track you. If you have Bluetooth on, then nearby Bluetooth devices will constantly be scanning for your signature and they can track you. If your cell phone is in an environment where there are recognizable sounds, they can turn it on remotely and track you. So, like, there's a lot of stuff that they can do with cell phones specifically that even if you have it in like an RFID thing, even if you cover it in tinfoil, they can probably still track you. So the whole idea is that, like, you should try to do as much without a cell phone as possible. But if you have to have a cell phone, turn off all features that you can. Try to have it be as private as possible. A prepaid cheapo that you don't mind chucking at a wall if you need to. And like load it with a bunch of useful stuff, because if it's not useful, if it's just there because you want it, it's a liability. Ideally, be in a location where you can get cheap prepaid cell phones from a street vendor, and then you can just discard those when you need to. Shit like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's I think a lot of people have even started to kind of like contemplate that without even contemplating the idea of like going gray or anything like that. I think a lot of people started talking about leaving their smartphones at home for some of their trips and things like that. I've also heard, like you were talking about, some of these kind of indirect ways of tracking. I've also heard that essentially it's the towers that your cell phone doesn't ping that they can also use to essentially triangulate where you are, if they know where you were in the recent past, which is also kind of like an inverted way of tracking you, right? But so from that standpoint, like electronics wise, I mean, do you have to go without the, how should I put it? Like the creature comforts of electronics if you are going gray, or are there other things out there that are accessible that you would say are probably I'd say not a gigantic liability in order to use?
Well, so the first thing is that, like, cell phones are like a base unit of technology, right? Cell phones, they don't. The thing about them is that they can either be attached to your name or an anonymous person's name or no name. It depends on where you get it and how you source that. Same with the SIM involved in the cell phone. But you can. There's a variety of things that you can do that'll sort of prevent them from being tracked. Like you can make a Faraday box, chuck your phone in the Faraday box, and just like, only take it out when you absolutely need to, and then you can like take it, like put it back in, and you're off the grid again. Shit like that. There are things you can do that'll make it harder for them. Like
Yeah.
what your Faraday box would need would be like metal shielding that keeps the signals out, and like a rubber gasket to keep the air out. Because if the air can get in, then their sounds can get in, their frequencies can get in, and they can still track your phone. Because what they'll do is they'll play tones, frequencies that are oftentimes even like too quiet for people to hear, and they'll bounce that off of things, and they've used that to do automated advertising in person, where like your phone passes by a display and the display automatically switches to a different ad that they think you'll like. Like there's a lot of stuff like that, but the state uses it obviously for the purposes of tracking you specifically. So I mean, there's like a ton of things that are done to like that make cell phones sort of a liability. You can also just get a phone that's like sort of more private by default. You can make a sort of ghost phone with certain operating systems. Maybe I'll write something on that like in the future. But like, if you want more information on that, there's a good channel called The Hated One that I subscribe to on YouTube, and he's got some great tutorials on how to have a more private cell phone. There's no like magic bullet though. Ultimately, in terms of creature comforts, you would do better with an air-gapped device.
Yeah.
That meaning like not connected to the internet, not connected to anything that would connect to the internet.
Yeah, I was doing research on it, and first, like any of the out of the box quote unquote encrypted phones, they're all ridiculously priced. I mean, you're talking like 5-10 grand for an encrypted phone, right? And then on top of that, if you were to look for some alternative, there's ways where you can take a smartphone and essentially the way you would with a laptop, and essentially create almost like a burner CPU on a laptop or on essentially the hard drive of the phone or the flash drive of the phone. It still isn't completely airtight. I mean, there are still ways for them to essentially indirectly track where you're making at least that direct connection, which I think is also part of the problem with OPSEC in terms of connecting to the internet just in general, because it's almost always that connection point that's the problem. You can encrypt the communication throughout the midsection, but it's when it's coming on and coming off of the internet where it's typically the most vulnerable in that transgression.
Especially Wi-Fi, because the Wi-Fi, you can look up a Wi-Fi map and see every router that exists, and the routers that exist are part of a public map, and you can see where a device is going and has been, and track things in real time. And this is public information. This is public data, and it's not illegal to access this. You can like Google like Wi-Fi router tracker map or something like that, and it'll you can Google it or use a better search engine, but whatever. I'm assuming this tutorial is essentially for noobs, so you can Google it, or you can use like pre-search as people saw on that Agorist Nexus site. There's a link for that. You can do a bunch of searches that are not tracked and shit. So anyway, the point is that like if you look up these maps, you can see that every Wi-Fi router is like visible. You can see this public map of like all the stuff that like all the routers that exist, all the devices connected to those routers. And what that means is that effectively the US government has access to the same information, and if they see your device on that router address, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's and so I shared the link to presearch.org, which is, for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's a decentralized search engine that you can use. And then, so on that, like in that vein, decentralization, are you I would think, being in the agorist space, are you pro, say, like blockchain and crypto? Is that something that you kind of like dabble in?
I get paid in Bitcoin Cash, and I also heavily advocate using the blockchain as a way to decentralize your content production, because I've been censored on multiple platforms. Twitter has banned me. They did that as part of their anti-Trump bullshit, even though like I'm firmly anti-Trump.
Yeah.
and because they were basically using that as an excuse to get rid of everyone they didn't like. It wasn't about Trump. That was a lie.
Yeah.
So I was banned during that. I was banned from Discord for running an anti-pedophile server. I was banned from Reddit for spamming when I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like I've been banned from a lot of places, and Facebook censored the outlet that I write for. They banned the founder, which effectively censored me too, because it banned not only the Agorist Nexus page, which had thousands of likes, but it also censored like multiple pages that he would share Agorist Nexus content to. So like I've been censored so much, but you can't stop the signal if it's diversified, if it's decentralized, and specifically centralization is the problem with content. And the fact that it can be shut off, controlled, the fact that people can decide how you put your words, the fact that like content can be refused to be sent to people because it's about something.
Yep.
So things like that mean that I constantly promote things like library, and I constantly promote things like PocketNet, which is if anybody wants to go to jeremiahharding.com/pocketnet, you can find my invite link to that. And it's a blockchain-based social media application that lets you post full-on blog posts, and also normal posts, and images, things like that. It's like Twitter and Facebook without video yet, but they're working on that. They're going to get not only stored video, but streaming video as at some point. But basically, you can use like both PocketNet and Library to get the same kind of social network experience for the most part without the streaming that you would anywhere else, and you get it uncensored. Plus, you say you're on Library. Do you get your videos synced to Library, or do you how do you do that personally?
Yeah, so right now we're streaming live to library to Odyssey because they just opened that up. So
okay.
it's on there live, and then I have the option. It's currently hooked up to just mirror the YouTube, so like it'll download the final copy from YouTube, which is a little bass awkward because I mean it's technically already there from accepting the live cast, but yeah.
Well, that's what I do right now. Like my live streams are available after they stream on Library. So I'm glad that you do that too. I keep telling people you need to get on the blockchain. You need to stop relying on centralized media. They're going to censor you. They don't give a fuck about you, your product, your cattle. It doesn't matter what you have to say. They will find a way to ban you for it. Because you're saying something that like is counter to the narrative. So like I've been talking for a significant period of time ever since last year about the fact that this COVID stuff is just an excuse for the elites to create a privacy-free panopticon of slavery and general evil. And people have not been listening to me about that. I told them that it leaked from a biosafety level 4 lab in the beginning of last year. They didn't listen to me. Even though I was citing the guy who wrote the U.S. Convention on Bioweapons, even though I was citing many doctors who were on my side, they didn't give a fucking shit. So ultimately, I've been saying a lot of stuff that's countered the narrative for a significant period of time, and that's the real reason Twitter banned me. They claimed it was for platform manipulation and spam, but couldn't highlight any platform manipulation or spam. They banned me because they didn't like what I was saying. So obviously I came back and kept saying it because fuck them. But at the same time, I'm advocating people diversify. I'm advocating they decentralize. I want people on PocketNet. I want people on Library. I want people on as many blockchain platforms as possible. And also, part of the reason I want people on the blockchain is because it might get them into cryptocurrency. And what that would do, what that would allow, is it would allow them to realize greater levels of privacy. There are coins like Monero and Pirate Chain, which allow people to interact with the counter economy much more easily, with automatic privacy built in. There are also ways to anonymize transactions, like Wasabi with Bitcoin, or Cash Shuffle with the Simple Ledger protocol, Electron Cash Wallet. There's like lots of stuff that you can do to anonymize yourself and become grayer if you understand cryptos. And getting cryptos for interacting with content is a good way to get started because you don't have to do anything. It's hands off. As long as you post and like interact with content on these sites, you get cryptos. So like, and that's the same with PocketNet. You get part of their Pocket Coin share.
And that's what I would tell anyone who's watching this on what's considered Web 2.0 or like traditional social media. You are the product, right? Like your interactions, your posts, your thought leadership, and things like that. They're making money off of your back. Like you're providing the product, they provide the platform, and they get the lion's share of the financial benefit. So when you go onto the blockchain, that power dynamic is flipped on its head, right? So you're actually the one that's getting, the predominant amount of the compensation. I would tell you those are all fantastic locations. I would say also give a look to Hive if you haven't already. What I love about Hive is they were part of the Steam blockchain. Steam went to go kind of centralize because the owner's son did this kind of like, 11th hour or midnight try and takeover of the blockchain. And all of the people that were there that were, purists, they were for decentralization, they bounced. And that's what, that hard fork created was the Hive blockchain. Troll with a Purpose said, if you haven't been banned yet, are you even real?
Yeah, right. Also, one other thing. What's Vim? I heard you saying something about Vim.
Yep. So Vim is essentially VIMM.TV is kind of like Twitch, but for the Hive blockchain. So it's live streaming. There's a ton of gamers from like overseas and stuff like that. And I can tell you that on the blockchain, regardless of where you are, I have seen most people would tell you, oh, that is a cesspool of conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. I can tell you when the stuff went down between Israel and Palestine, the first place I went was to the blockchain because there were people direct in the shit in Gaza Strip posting stuff, live and first person. That is the way you are going to get the best unfiltered, unadulterated information, as opposed to, going through a media outlet that's going to apply their interpretation and their selective interpretation at that of the facts, right? So yeah, I would definitely advocate for that. And interestingly enough, you brought up Wasabi, and Wasabi goes really closely, really well with cold storage wallets. And so that's something that I also kind of have my to-do list to go over, is to like show folks how to create a very basic, cold storage wallet and then throw some Monero on there, kind of like their bug out money,
Right.
But so yeah, no, that is, look, my personal belief, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I mean, blockchain and decentralization means that so many of the structures and the centralized kind of infrastructure that we think of in terms of politics and governance almost becomes inconsequential in the future if you apply it, kind of to the nth degree. Is that something that you've kind of contemplated yourself?
See, could be. It depends on how much they want to fuck you up. If you're a high value target, it's not going to matter. They're still going to find a way to track you, and you need to find a way to become invisible real quick or flee your country or something. Like, there's a lot of stuff because I'm a pessimist. I'm a cynical asshole. I think people suck, and because of that, they're going to make everything terrible in the end. I foresee like a bloody apocalypse with rivers of blood and years of darkness, the likes of which will make Revelations look like a children's story. Like, that's my particular outlook, and I don't foresee decentralization helping with that because most people are cunts, and most people won't do it. Most people are still totally satisfied and will yell at you if you decide to bring this sort of thing up to them. And I've brought it out to a significant amount of people, and this politics is downstream from culture. And this COVID thing has created so many fucking like Karens that it's astounding. Like, and they claim that the people who resist the control are the Karens. They have flipped the script. Used to be Karens were the people who were annoying, who would demand to see managers, who would call the cops on lemonade stands. Now, the people demanding managers, demanding people be removed from premises and calling the cops, now somehow they aren't the Karens? No, fucking bullshit. This has created a massive culture of snitching, a massive culture of peer pressure over like knowledge and facts, over civil discourse. And I think ultimately the key reason why they hyped this up, because it's not that deep, it's not that bad. The key reason they hyped this up, beyond the ability to control people with vaccines, beyond the fact that, you know, Bill Gates said if we make enough vaccines, maybe we can control the population, beyond the fact that the Georgia Guidestones say that we should be in 500 million or below people in perpetual harmony of with nature. You know, beyond the fact that we're ruled by a bloodthirsty cabal of conspiratorial evil people that are involved in the occult, beyond all of that, they still created this culture where they're making it easier for them to control people, and where people feel like controlling others is the virtuous thing to do. Yeah. So, I mean, I think ultimately we're absolutely fucked, and the people are going to eat each other up, and the people who refuse will be jailed and or prosecuted in some way. I think if there's not a Boog, that it's going to go down much worse. Like, I think Boog is like one of the best potential options, but like, I also try not to advocate that because I don't want to violate the Smith Act and get my citizenship revoked. Yeah. Because the U.S. government is run by a cabal of bloodthirsty tyrants, and they don't like to be questioned. They don't like to have the idea that they won't always be in power, you know, out there, which is why you'll notice when the Capitol tantrum happened and a bunch of whiny Republicans cried that they didn't have their particular tyrant in charge, that like was the impetus for a bunch of these people to say, "Oh, they violated our sacred halls," and no, they didn't. Your halls aren't sacred, you fucking chud. Like they're worthless. They're actual scam artists.
The occult temple of the Capitol is basically what it is. I mean, that's essentially what it is. And how dare you sully it with your plebe feet and you know, touch our sacred things. You know, it is. Look, I'm not going to white pill you. I obviously, I think you're a self-professed black pillar. That's fine. I think the world needs at least more people who are at least on the side that says, look, if you don't change things, it's going to get all fucked. And then you're saying, like, this is how fucked I think it's going to get. I think the world needs more people like that. The one thing I would say is I do see some positive threads of, in some of the most, like, totalitarian and like fucked up places, blockchain was a way for, you know, things like free markets and the Agora to thrive, right? So like
the Agora, free markets.
Well, yes,
the free market has never existed.
Yeah. So at the very least, to try and be a little bit more exact, at least, you know, freer markets away from central planners, right? And so that being said, like a place like Cuba, right? For a number of years, there was, you know, essentially, and still to this day, to a certain extent, there are places that in Cuba that have awful conditions. There were entrepreneurs who refused to do business in plain view of the state, and did it using Bitcoin and barter and things like that, and they were actually able to live a semi-halfway decent life despite, you know, the horror that was around them, essentially.
Venezuela, Mexico, Brazil, Russia, New Zealand, Australia, China to a certain extent, but it's smaller there because you got to be hush. You know, there's a significant amount of places that it's made freer in pockets. I'm not saying it's not. What I am saying though is that, like, and this is the thing, like, I don't want to be too much of a doomer because, like, the idea of like, you know, bloody apocalypse and inevitability is stressful, and stress leads to inaction, like why bother mentality. My mentality is like the same mentality that Robert Heinlein espoused in his Lazarus Long quote, where he said, you know, certainly the game is rigged. Don't let that stop you. If you don't bet, you can't win. That's my mentality. Like, I think ultimately, you know, there's only action and inaction, and if you're being inactive, you sort of earned your lot in life. Like, so that's my bias. Like, and because I have to make everything about Sonic, I also have to bring up that he says, if you have time to worry, then run. Nothing starts until you take action. That's his mentality.
Yep.
Like, the whole idea is like you have to keep moving anyway, even though the brutal system of oppression, even though the grinding machine that wants to destroy you is still on the march. You still have to keep moving. And that's the whole point of being a gray man, is to persist even though they want to X you out as a person.
And to your point, the other thing here is, the idea of, like, the remnant, or speaking to the few that will actually hear the message when it all falls down around you, right? Like, who will be the seeds of regrowth afterward, right? Like, you might have to live through a very dark period, but once that dark period clears, who will be the people that actually learn the lesson, and so to that extent, being a gray man gives you the opportunity to survive to the point where you could be that person, and help kind of. What's really interesting is my self kind of journey, like, dirty secret, like, and we talked a little bit about it before I went live, like, these conversations, these interviews are more for, like, my edification than, like, I mean, the audience comes along with me, but I ask questions because I want to know the information and learn it. But so walking through kind of like natural rights and the idea of what existence is should or is based off of, like, just from a standpoint of good and bad. What's crazy is we go through, as human beings, these cycles where it's like, a high level of liberty and autonomy, but that's typically only kind of like at the zenith, and then all of a sudden we go just steadily into this downswing where we just collect more authoritarian, regimes, tyranny, theft, murder, and the like that come with it, until it finally bottoms out, and then we go back up the roller coaster again.
See, maybe. See, here's the thing.
I'd love to hear your point on this. Yep.
I understand where you're coming from, and I used to come from it as well. But the zeniths of liberty have always come with the the enforcement of some sort of statism, some sort of lopsided enforcement hierarchy. It's like the other day I saw this PragerU video, like in a thumbnail, right? And I was like, I don't need to watch this. I don't need to watch this. And the reason I said I don't need to watch this is because it was called America's Promise. So I said, hey, look, a PragerU vid I don't need to watch. America made different promises to different people and has no problem breaking its promises whenever it feels like. Any vid by conservacucks is going to fail to recognize the breadth of this deception. Fuck America, lying hoe. And the reason I put it that way is because, like, America started out with slavery. There was an entire group of people, not just, dark-skinned, but anybody basically that they wanted, who they enslaved. Whiteness was an invention created by the state to enslave people, to create a caste system by which it was okay that, the Irish, the Chinese, the blacks were all working on their shit under the threat of force, under the threat of unpleasant conditions. They didn't have equal access to the law. Women were still second-class citizens, and this was all designed to serve a state which was systematically, like, wiping out entire races of people, basically for profit and power in the form of manifest destiny. So the fact is that the U.S. government was never small. The Constitution never meant shit. Lysander Spooner behind you would agree with me on that. Whether the Constitution be one thing or another, it has either authorized what we have now, or it is unfit, or it is been powerless to prevent it. Otherwise, it is unfit to exist. So, I mean, the whole point of the original U.S. was to lie to people, claim that there was a small government, claim that everybody had an equal access to the fruits of liberty, and then push this scam to the ultimate conclusion of the biggest government the world has ever known.
Yep.
So, I mean, ultimately, it was never really like it's not about ebb and flow. It's about scamming people enough to think that a place that starts with the state will ever be a good one.
Yeah. No, Mike Rufo's trolling. He goes, don't you know that's Karl Marx? No, it's not Karl Marx. What's funny is how many people mistake Spooner for Karl Marx. But so that being said, I agree with you. I think the formation of the country under the Constitution was essentially a theft of the opportunity for I don't know if I would necessarily call it true liberty, but at least like a better shot at liberty, right? Like we had a moment, and then it essentially got stolen by the same statists that we had before, and they just had different surnames, right? I think what's really bitterly ironic is they essentially just took what they had in England and remade it here. Like that's all they did. They kind of like put some different window dressing on it. But you know, for 11 years or so, under the Articles of Confederation, I think we had maybe a better shot at not repeating the same. We probably would have repeated some of the same sins, but what I'm saying is it might have delayed it, you know, for longer. But that being said, anyone who believes, I actually posted it earlier, like, you know, would you trust a homeowners association to protect your rights? And most people are like, hell no. Then I'm like, well, just think of the state and the federal government as essentially a homeowners association on fucking steroids. Like, you know, why would you trust them? You know, you don't trust anyone with your own personal rights. But I agree with you. I think those that roller coaster ride. I mean, that moment of liberty is fleeting, right? Like at least when you're looking to some kind of centralized authority, you know, to protect the liberty. Like fuck that. You protect your own liberty. Like that's the way this thing goes. But so
it's always gone, which is why the U.S. government immediately started quelling rebellions, the Whiskey Rebellion, for instance, and the reason why they kept an iron grip on all commerce, the reason why they created the Transcontinental Railroad, because it was an easy way to assist their monopoly power and get more land to grab. Because the more land they grab, the more like power they isolate, and the more of the country they can say, hey, that's ours. You need to follow our bullshit rules on it. So like the U.S. government was never libertarian. No government was ever libertarian. The idea of a libertarian government is a contradiction in terms. It's the reason why libertarian political parties will never succeed, because they're partyarchy. And as Konkin put it, partyarchy is the death of liberty. Like, I mean, he didn't exactly say that, but he basically did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever altruism you think exists within political systems, typically at the end of the day, all it is a battle for power. That's all it is.
Altruism doesn't exist.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, everyone is inherently, to a certain extent, biased and selfish, right? Like, which is also part of the problem with collectivists trying to think that they're going to save the world's or fix the world's problems because they're so, you know, forthright and altruistic and everything like that. They are always going to have inherent biases or other just kind of like, you know, natural. I don't even know what to put it, like self-serving interests that are essentially going to, you know, direct it in a way that doesn't, and in fact probably causes more harm than good ultimately, you know. But I don't know. I digress. Now you're blackpilling me. Thank you.
Well, that's what I do. I come into a room and I immediately make it more depressing.
Yeah. But in all honesty, I truly believe that if I could wave a magic wand and like all of the black-pilled people became white-pilled people, I think that wouldn't be good. I think you need people raising the alarm bell to be like, this shit's going to get ugly, and you need to be ready, right? Which, by the way, the gray man persona is someone like you can't just flip that switch. Like you have to prepare and you have to be ready for when you do want to kind of start to blend in and kind of like fade away, you know? And then we talked about it right at the beginning. You hit on something else in the article. You know, if you can't run 100 meters without being winded, how the hell are you ever supposed to, you know, essentially protect yourself or blend in or get away when you need to? Right. You know, that's something that have you always been someone who's been, you know, into kind of like bettering yourself from a physical standpoint, or is that a recent thing?
For about 7 or 8 years. I wasn't really like, I was never a jock in high school or any of that. I was always sort of like the nerdy guy who saw that everything sucked and sort of accepted it, and like, but like I rebelled in ways that I could, but I was also like an extreme far right person in high school, and um, I sort of veered toward libertarianism when I realized that I actually didn't know why we were going to war. I didn't realize I didn't like have any justification for the state. I played a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog games, and he's basically libertarian. So like the whole like mentality kind of started to shift. Also, I started to realize that humans were fucking up the planet, and lots of little things like that meant that like I started to veer in the direction of libertarianism and anarchy, and but before then I was like kind of fascist, and like when I was like in the end year of high school, a lot of my ideas had shifted, and I had become the sort of like proto like Republican who smokes pot libertarian, and like beyond that, beyond getting through all of that, like it sort of shifted toward over the years, over like the next 3 or 4 years, toward the Ron Paul camp. Like there was a temporary Gary Johnson. I did some temporary activism with Yale. I did shit like that, and then eventually I realized all that was bullshit and became anarchist. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because, you know, like ultimately the way that you need to reach certain people is different, you know, and everybody has a certain way that they can be reached. And so I'm not necessarily the best approach for everyone, but I am sort of like there for the people who want the negative side. And the gray man stuff is one of the ways in which you can sort of it's like the last ditch effort. It's like if I go too extreme and they decide to start shutting me down, I need to move away from all of this, and I need to have a way to start over, or like bridge the gap between when this is happening and when I clear my name and society demands my release. Shit like that. But part of that is the fact that like over the past 7 years, like I basically realized I had all these grandiose plans to like, you know, become one of these badasses who's like anarchist and activism and trying to make a difference. And then I realized, hey, I'm weak as fuck. I can't do shit. So like basically every day at this point, except one day a week, I work out hard for like an hour, half an hour to an hour, and it's like high intensity interval training, and I'm trying to get my endurance up, lower my body fat percentage, and get gains. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you can't carry yourself well, you're not going to be able to run from the state. If you can't run, you can't run from the state. I keep telling people, who are capable, try to get fit, try to get able to move, try to get able to boog, because if you can't, you're already fucked. So the whole idea of all these, you know, keyboard warriors with their tactical gear saying that they're awesome badasses because they got really good results at the range once is stupid. They need to be able to do this on a daily basis. They need to have good enough endurance, big enough muscles, high enough levels of like physical acuity where they can like perform basic maneuvers on a field. And if they can't do that sort of thing, if they're not even trying to train, then they'll never be gray because they can't run, and they'll never be an effective asset for the eventual anarchist hibiscus flower. So, I mean, the whole idea of being anarchist should be to oppose the state in as many ways as possible. The state wants you to be a servile tax cow who sits on your couch and does nothing but watch their bullshit controlled opposition media all day, and then eject your shit from both your ass and your mouth, so that they can control the population. They want a passive people who are sick and able to be made more sick because their immune systems suck. That way they can force them onto government-sponsored healthcare. They want people who are too lazy to properly care for kids so that their kids grow up being more parented by the school system and whatever other indoctrination centers they have. That way these kids grow up into nice little soldiers too. And they want all of this because they want people to be passive. They want people to be incapable and unwilling to defend themselves. So the best possible resistance you could do that's easy, that would be something you can do every day, regardless of what regulations are in place, you can work out. You can better your body. You can become more capable of being the kind of person who can survive when they start to decide that you have too much to say.
Yep. No, look, that is, I'm completely on board with that. I think that is like, even Mike saying that's speaking my language. That's completely on point. I think that is there is a concerted effort to do all of what you said, and it is something that has played out for hundreds of years, but I think that it's been magnified or amplified within the last 12 to 15 months. And hopefully some people are waking up to that fact, and they're taking the steps to, at least move in that direction, right? Like to do some of the prep work. So I think all of that it's just prudent. I mean, it's risk management too, right? It's like, don't assume that things will be great forever, or don't even assume that things will be great, right? Plan for the worst and hope for the best. But it's definitely moving in a direction that is not positive. It's not positive.
Yeah, I mean, Trump says he wants to make America great again. America always sucked ass through a coffee straw, so fuck America.
That needs to be a quote. If you're not stealing that from someone, that needs to be a quote. Look, tell everyone where they can find your information, where you're, publishing more blog posts or the podcast /vlog.
You can find me at agoristnexus.com. Occasionally, I'm also the editor for their podcast, so you can listen to that if you want to hear some of my handiwork. But also, the thing that I normally tell people is I have a list of links through Cointree right now, which is a Naomi Brockwell joint. cointr.ee/insanity is free. You can find me at all those links, and it also gives crypto donation addresses in case somebody wants to throw. But like the point is that like primarily I say it like that's a hub you can find my links at. In case I'm censored from one place, you can find me at another there, and I pretty much have all my places listed there. All the stuff that I primarily post on. So there's like all of that stuff as a potential possibility. But like you can also just find me on Twitter at JeremiahEXE, or you can find me anywhere else by Insanity is Free. Like I have my usernames right there at the top. I'm using an OBS virtual camera to have my bullshit on the screen.
Awesome. No, and I have to convert over to OBS, and you've given me something that I kind of have heard about in the past, but I've never really bid on. Right now, most of my links, like I can throw it on the scroll on the bottom, are on Linktree, which is more of like a standard, Web 2.0 type, page or kind of pop-up page for links and stuff like that. It's going to be Cointree probably by this evening. So that being said, I appreciate it. I'm glad I got some value out of this too, which is fantastic. So,
and maybe go check out Naomi Brockwell. She's the one who runs that project, and she also has a lot of good stuff to say.
She also does a podcast on crypto, right? I think she does she contributes to it. I forget if it's hers or if she does it I think in tandem with a co-host. It is hers, right? Yeah. I've seen her a couple times. It's good. She's actually prognosticated a couple of things that were coming down the pike that she was one of the first people I ever heard talk about it. I mean, just in terms of the bear market the bull market within the last couple of years. She was, cheerleading it for a while and telling people to get in. So, but no, that's all fantastic news. Look, I want to say thank you. I appreciate it. Look, we're gonna have to do this again sometime because this stuff, it keeps coming up and it's going to keep coming up. And I think as much as we can bring people good information and kind of help them be prepared, the better. So,
gotcha.
I want to say thank you. Have a very good evening. And to everyone else who's watching, I will be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.